Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Body Wisdom Podcast, where we discuss the mind body connection and its relationship to health and well being. My name is Tami Bulmash, and I'm very excited about today's very lovely and special guest, Dr. Turner Osler. Dr. Turner Osler is a surgeon and research epidemiologist who has published over 300 peer reviewed medical papers. After receiving a master's degree in biostatistics and a grant from the National Institute of Health in 2005, he traded the OR for full-time outcomes research. Now an emeritus professor, teacher, inventor, and CEO of Core 360, he studies the harm caused by passive sitting. When Dr. Turner left the operating room to do research full-time, he was sitting far more than he was accustomed to. He realized he needed to create a better sitting solution to push back against the terrible chairs that Big Chair and ergonomists have been selling for decades. Working with a team of other doctors, designers, and bodywork experts, they created not just a new chair, but an entirely new way to sit that worked with the body rather than against it. They believe that the body's perfect internal ergonomics, its skeleton, is a far better route to perfect posture than ergonomic chairs that try to shore up one's body with external supports, which serve only to distort one's naturally perfect posture, leading to a host of problems. He decided we should all be sitting better and set out to make his vision of a more healthy sitting experience a reality. Hi, Turner, and welcome to our show. I am so happy to have you here with us today.
Tami, I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for having me on. And thanks for that introduction. I hardly recognize that guy.
Well, I recognize that guy because I've cited that guy in quite a few publications. I love your work. I'm such a huge fan of your work. I'm curious though, because I'm sitting here in short sleeves and you look like you're a bit cooler. What is the temperature like in Vermont these days?
Oh yeah, so no, we're headed for zero again tonight. I'm on the
Goodness.
shores. I'm on the shores of Lake Champlain.
Wow! Oh, how beautiful!
In the distance, you can see New York State and ski areas. So everything's iced up. People are out there, driving around on the weekend in their trucks. The ice is really quite robust this time of year.
Wow.
It's like a Fellini movie out there. Trucks go by and ice fishing houses are being towed and people are ice skating and
Wow.
it's fun living on a lake this far north.
It sounds beautiful. Very cold, but sounds beautiful. I've never been to Vermont, but I would like to go one day.
Well, I lived in Alaska for many years, and we used to say there is no cold weather. There are only inadequately dressed people. And I gotta say, I'm still wearing my Alaska mountaineering gear sometimes. It gets a little chilly here. It's true.
Wow. Well, you're used to it. Yeah, I was born in Chicago, but I don't think I would fare well there after living in Florida for so many years. But wonderful. Well, it's nice to hear how other people are doing in their corner of the world when most of us are stuck in the same corner for quite some time. So, Turner, I wanted to talk to you about your amazing article that you recently wrote for the publication Elemental. And the title is, Could Changing Your Chair Add Years to Your Life? Could you tell me a little bit about what led you to want to write this piece?
Well, so my background is in medicine. I'm an MD, and I spent many years as a surgeon and as a researcher. I'm interested in disease and health. And as a surgeon, you can take care of maybe 10,000 people in a career because you can only operate on people one at a time, and then you have to get them out of the ICU and home again. So it's an important job, but it's in some sense a limited job. And then I discovered epidemiology, where if you just figure out the problem and the solution, you can touch tens of millions of lives, maybe hundreds of millions of lives, which is, a much more dramatic multiplier.
Yeah.
And so as I was, studying the epidemiology of trauma, I just stumbled onto the problem of sitting and what a catastrophe it was for the Western world. And it was something that I have to say I was pretty much unaware of because they certainly didn't mention it in medical school. It just didn't come up. We like everybody else, we're sitting in lectures all day, and then we go home and sit and do our homework all night, and we thought sitting was a normal thing to do. But as an undergraduate at Princeton, I took some courses in anthropology, and I've, if I hadn't tumbled into neurobiology, I think I would have been an anthropologist, because it's just such an interesting experiment to see how life could have been lived differently merely by checking out other cultures that actually are living their lives differently. So I was having back pain because I was sitting writing computer code to do mathematical modeling of trauma center outcomes. And as I was trying to riddle out why it was that I was suddenly having back pain, because I'd been pretty much perfect for my whole life. I'd never been sick ever. And by taking a deep dive into it, I discovered through the anthropologic literature that other cultures that don't sit like we do pretty much don't have back pain. And so the penny dropped, and well, the human spine is basically perfect. So why is it that it fails 80% of us in such a stark way that we seek medical help, and we're cranky with our loved ones, and we can't get around, and we fear another bout of back pain, and maybe somebody gives us narcotics to ease the edge, and maybe we tumble into drug addiction and worse. So the problem of back pain is an immense one. It's $100 billion a year it costs the United States economy. Well, that's right up there with cancer and heart disease. It's an immense problem. But it's hiding in plain sight because people think chairs are normal, and they think sitting is the normal human posture. But this, of course, isn't so. There aren't very many hunter-gatherer tribes left anymore. There's some way up the Amazon, in Brazil, and there are some in Tanzania, the Hadza, or another hunter-gatherer tribe, and they're available for anthropologists to come hang out with. And so, we've got so much to learn from the people that we were for, well, really 3 million years. We took that first fateful step out of the trees and onto the savanna, and we went from being just gatherers to being hunter-gatherers. And once we became hunter-gatherers, suddenly we're traveling 5, 10, even 15 miles a day on foot, gathering roots and tubers, but also hunting game and so on. And over millions of years, our milieu interieur, our biochemical nature came to expect that we would, be physically active. And so, this is how our system is optimized. When we suddenly became agricultural, and then even more suddenly sat down to do work at a PC, our biochemical selves, our evolved selves, really haven't caught up to the new life that we've decided to live. Sitting slumped still in front of a computer all day has been a catastrophe for us. And then I stumbled on a paper written by some very good epidemiologists that shows quite clearly that those who sit 8 or more hours a day, which is most of us, lose on average 2 life years to merely sitting. And it's not the sort of problem that can be addressed by going to the gym. That's a completely different sort of problem where you're just working on cardiovascular capacity. The mere activity of sitting passively distorts our biochemistry in a way that our bad cholesterol goes up, our good cholesterol goes down, our insulin goes up, our all-cause mortality goes up. And so, this seemed like such a dramatic thing because, any epidemiologist would give anything to add 2 life years to a population. And here it is, hiding in plain sight. Everybody's sitting on these chairs, and these chairs are catastrophically bad for people. And the story has been told many times, but in order to see what life would be like if we didn't sit, what you need is a population that doesn't have chairs. And hunter-gatherers are the people you want because they're hunting and gathering. They don't have furniture. They didn't invent it. So they sit naturally in the sense that they adopt resting postures, which for the Hadza in Tanzania is squatting. And so squatting is a very interesting posture that was how was the rest posture for human beings for most of our evolutionary time. It's an interesting posture because it allows you to stay warm. You don't have a lot of surface area on the ground losing heat, and it allows you not to get covered with bugs and dirt because only your feet are touching the ground. And so, it's a great posture to rest in, except almost no Westerners can squat, and certainly not, most Westerners can't squat comfortably and eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or play Scrabble with their kid because they've lost the ability to squat, which is very interesting because all children are born natural squatters. You watch a child start to lose his balance and they'll go right to a squat to catch themselves. Yeah. So it's a very interesting thing that squatting is part of our birthright, and yet it's taken from us early on. I think because we take kids and we put them in chairs, and when they sit 90 degrees at the ankle, 90 at the knee, and 90 at the hip, for just a few years, they lose the ability to squat gracefully, and really they never get it back. And it's tragic because kids are born with this vast vocabulary of movements that they can make, and we sculpt away so many that we claim we're teaching them how to behave like normal human beings, but really we're robbing them of their birthright to, squat comfortably, as our ancestors did for literally millions of years. Now, I love the Hadza because they're not mythologized. They've been studied quite carefully, and they're like normal people. When researchers show up and they have camp chairs in their tents, the Hadza are all over it. They want to lounge in chairs just like any Manhattanite. They love the idea of slouching in chairs. They just don't have them, so they haven't been corrupted by chairs. And we've seen this movie before with the Hadza. 100 years ago, they were introduced to tobacco, and they became prolific smokers. They love to smoke, which is terrible for them, of course. So they're not like some noble savage. They're just people just like us who haven't had the opportunity to be ruined by furniture. So it's just such an interesting story that's been well told by several researchers. And the Hadza they're very generous people. They're happy to share their lives and their stories with researchers who come along, and the Hadza can speak Swahili as well as their native tongue, so they're able to converse with researchers who take the trouble to learn Swahili. But I love the idea that if a Hadza was to move to Manhattan, he'd be slouching in a ergonomic chair just like the rest of us, because they're not innately immune. They have just grown up without this particular devastating distraction, whereas the rest of us think chairs are normal. And in some sense, chairs are normal because, well, they're just built into our lives. You can't look out a window unless you're sitting on a chair, right? Because you'd be below the window, so you couldn't see out, right? Or if you go to a restaurant and tell the maitre d' that you won't sit on his damnable machine that kills people, they'll show you the door. You're expected to sit in a chair if you go to a restaurant, and if you want to stand up at a movie theater, they'll show you the way out, because chairs are just an expected part of our lives. Yes. And unfortunately, they're extremely bad for us. It's just like smoking in the 50s. People thought smoking was normal because everyone smoked, but no, that's not right. People for most of human history didn't smoke, right? And so when we're introduced to there's some pleasures that are just too intense for the human soul to deal with. So when we were introduced to sugar, people in England were eating over 100 pounds of sugar a year each.
Oh my gosh.
Basically, they all lost their teeth, and
my gosh.
No, it was a catastrophe. When the English were introduced to smoking, they began smoking prolifically, and they had lip cancer and tongue cancer and heart disease and lung disease and all of that. There's some pleasures that humans just aren't proof against. And it's not just humans. A rat will bar press to get cocaine until it falls over from exhaustion and starvation. Cocaine is just too much fun for rats. They'll die for it. And so it turns out that sitting is such a wonderful thing that we're willing to slump all day long in front of a computer, even though it's shaving a couple of years off our life. And in the process ruining our posture, weakening our core, and leading to an epidemic of back pain. So the deal with the deal we've made with chairs is a very bad one. And it's not easy to find a way out because everybody thinks sitting is a normal thing for human beings to do.
Yeah. It's amazing. I studied anthropology in grad school,
Uh-huh.
and because I was studying it, I became so enthralled in these cultures that are able to continue using the body as it was designed
Mhm.
because they bend at the joints, they do squats, and but I don't think all hope is lost because in your article you also mentioned how even though it would be unlikely for us to just go and start squatting in front of the TV and just work in a squat, you did talk about something else that we could do that kind of became the new squat. So could you share a little bit about what else we can do with our skeletal system to help support ourselves while we sit?
Well, about squatting, I was giving a lecture at some Feldenkrais conference, a bodywork conference,
Hmm.
and a young woman who was had come over from Vietnam with her family when she was young. They were taken in by a family in the Midwest someplace, and they were set up with an apartment, and they'd never been out of Vietnam, and so they were like in an apartment with all this Western modern stuff, and they just had no idea what to do with any of it. They didn't know how to turn on a dishwasher or any of that stuff. So their host left them just for a little while and then came to pick them up to go someplace. And their host came in and were shocked to find all the family that they were sponsoring, which was like half a dozen people, all on chairs squatting. They were just like squatting on the seat of a chair because the idea of sitting on a chair hadn't occurred to them. They just like
Wow.
thought their normal posture, which was squatting, and they were squatting on furniture. And their sponsors walked in and were just nonplussed by it. It was completely bewildering to them that people would squat when they could perfectly well be sitting. Never occurred to them to try and sit on furniture because wasn't part of their culture.
Oh, it's
So
amazing.
the idea that sitting is normal, no, we've been taught that sitting is normal.
Yeah.
So the idea of going back to squatting is, I think, anybody who's like does CrossFit or whatever knows is very hard to get a good squat. And the idea that you're going to play Scrabble while squatting is not going to happen for some of us for sure. But squatting, the basic idea is you're balanced over your ankles. So you're using the musculature of your spine and your body to stay balanced. So it's not a heavy lift, but it's a constant use of big muscle groups. So you're actually, burning glucose, and your metabolic rate goes up by as much as 20% and this has been measured by people who've studied the Hadza with accelerometers and exhaled gas machines. They've been studied to a fairly well. They're very tolerant of and of course, all of this measurement stuff with this stuff has just got to seem like bizarre voodoo magic to the Hadza. They put up with it quite pleasantly. They're willing subjects, but the Hadza, balance on their ankles, and it works for them. We pretty much can't get back to balancing on our ankles. But what I've come to discover is that we can perfectly well balance on our ischial tuberosities, on the sitting bones that are the low point on our pelvis. This is a human pelvis. This is the front, the pubic symphysis, and this is the sacrum and back, and this is where the babies come out. Can you believe you can fit a baby through that?
It's hard to believe.
No, it is. But if you look at it from the side, you see where the femur plugs in, where the leg bone, and right directly plumb exactly beneath where the femur is this bony prominence. And this is the ischial tuberosity. You have one on each side. You have two ischial tuberosities. And so this is when people are designed to stand in perfect balance on their femurs. It turns out if you just swing the femur out of the way, now they're designed to sit perfectly balanced on the ischial tuberosity. And so this is like the balance point for the human body. And if you just place people on their ischial tuberosities and let them find their balance, things go very well because you have spinal reflexes that adjust your spine and your head so it all balances on these. Basically, this is the kickstand of the human body. This is where you're designed to rest. The business of having a big cushy chair that you fall back in and your spine hunches over, this kind of completely ignores the elegant architecture and spinal reflexes that are built in to your system that lets you sit elegantly and really effortlessly, but with continuous muscular input. It's an interesting balance, so to say.
You explained that so beautifully. I'm going to save that clip and use that. That was just such a great, a great illustration. I would like to take a moment just to talk a little bit about what active sitting means. So what does it mean now? So, okay, we can balance on our ischial tuberosities, we can sit, but how are we actively sitting?
Right. So so we invented a chair that makes the seat that you sit on unstable. So you have to constantly rebalance because nobody's ever fallen asleep on one of our chairs because they'll be on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have a stable surface, you can get away with some slouching and hunching. But if the surface is unstable, really your spinal reflexes have to be constantly active, rebalancing everything. And it's interesting. We've taken our chairs out many times on a sunny day on the walking street in Burlington, Vermont, Church Street, and just put out a few chairs and let passersby try them out if they're interested. And it's always the same. People sit down and they're startled a little bit because they have to find their balance. And once they find their balance, they kind of settle into it, and their sternum comes up, and their shoulders come down, and their head comes back and balances over the first two cervical vertebrae. And they pretty quickly adopt an almost perfect posture without anybody telling them what to do. No video, no hands-on adjusting people. Just people find this posture almost within a couple of minutes. And I think they find that posture because they sit down, and because everything is unstable, they have to try one posture and then they try another. And if the second posture is better, they jump to that posture. These are small micro adjustments. And if they try another posture and if it's not better, they go back to the original one. And in very short order, they can explore a lot of different small adjustments to their posture until they find the posture that's perfect for them. And perfect for most people means that their lumbar lordosis is there, and their normal neck curve, and the skull is balanced precisely over the spine, all of this stuff. And it's been interesting for me because we invented this chair, but that doesn't actually mean we know what it's for. We invent it, and then people tell us how they use it and what it's good for. And I've been interested to hear people say, I never had much back pain, but my neck was killing. Your chair made my neck pain so much. Really? What? Oh, right. Because now you're balancing your head on top of your spine, so that this chronic kind of head thing that you had been doing when you were typing code goes away once your head comes back and balances over your spine. So by just kind of making things unstable, people's spinal reflexes have to find a posture that works moment to moment. And so they keep making micro adjustments, which has a couple of benefits. It lets them explore the space of possible postures until they find an optimal posture. And it also engages really big muscles, the internal external oblique, the transversalis. These are big muscles that burn a lot of glucose and change your milieu interior in a way that's good for your biochemistry, literally adding years to your life.
No,
So
that's amazing.
It's a very interesting story, and I'm shocked that I'm the one telling it.
But it's
But Big Chair, has kind of, steel case, and the big chair companies have convinced people that you can't sit without a headrest, a backrest, a footrest, armrest, lumbar support. You'll collapse, you'll die, you'll never get through the. This is not true. I'm a 70-year-old coot, and I'm perfectly comfortable sitting without a back on my chair all day long. Where did they get that stuff about no one is? Humans sat without chairs for 3 million years. And if as Big Chair tells us, lumbar support is the key to sitting comfortably. Yeah, well, we've had lumbar support for 60 years now, and 80% of America still has back pain. If you guys are so goddamn smart, why is no one getting better?
Yeah. Oh, it's wonderful. I know a lot of people are attached to their ergonomic chairs, they think, but for me, with what I teach with the Alexander technique, is you really want your body to be what supports you and not to rely on an external source. And so that's what I love about your chairs so much. Could you just tell me, for those who are listening right now who might be curious about your chairs, which one would you recommend for a beginner, someone who's just getting started with wanting to improve their posture or to reduce back pain?
Right. So we have a three different models of chairs up on our website. They all use the same mechanism, this device that makes sitting a sitting surface just a little unstable in every direction. You don't have to tip at 5 or 8 degrees to really kind of feel it all through your spine and your posture. So we use this mechanism in all of our chairs, and we just have a couple of different seat arrangements. We have one that has a little flourish on the back that kind of looks like the back of a seat, although it's only a few inches high, so it's not, you can't lean against it. It's just kind of a, it tells you where to land when you're coming in for a landing on your sitting bones. Which has got pretty comfortable padding built into it, so people can sit all day in front of their computer and write code or do their email or whatever. We have another version that's more like a bench surface that has a little less padding that equestrians love because it kind of approximates sitting on a horse if you turn it sidewise.
Oh.
And the Feldenkrais folks love it because it's really good for getting your posture, perfect. So they use it for teaching posture as a pedagogical device. So those are the two ones that we sell the most of, and really we sell the most of what we call the aerial chair, which kind of looks a little more like a chair because most of the people who seem to be buying our chairs, just want some way to sit comfortably for 10 hours a day. Well, that's a crazy ask, right? Because you're not supposed to be doing that. And the idea that it could be done at all is
Right.
shocking. Our chairs are a long way there, though, because they, keep people moving constantly, so they don't, kind of get stuck in one posture that exhausts some muscle group.
That's wonderful. I love what your company is doing, and I'm also really inspired by some of the initiatives that you've taken with your company, like the Button Chair project that you've done, which has the goal of making active sitting available to schools throughout the US and elsewhere and in the world, which is amazing. And something else which I think is so generous is that you've actually made it available to download some plans to make your own backless active chair on your website. These are just such unheard of things that people do in companies that want to sell chairs, but you're actually giving back to the community. And I was hoping you could just tell me a little bit more about these initiatives.
Right. So, I'm a little uncomfortable when you call it my company.
Sorry.
I just like had this idea, but really, there's a whole network of 20 somethings who, know how to do website design and graphic design and SEO
Yes.
and we've got an 85-year-old guy on our team who knows about business and keeps
Wow.
me from doing stupid stuff. And it's really quite an interesting team of people. And that's, I guess, one of the reasons I enjoy it so much is
Hmm.
because you hang around with young people and you learn a lot. So and they're and to be fair, they're extremely tolerant of a guy who, I don't just come from another century. I come from another millennia. I don't know about Twitter or Facebook or any of that stuff, and they're perfectly happy to have me stay out of that and just do what you do. Just keep typing. But we had the idea that so what happened was I was at some neocon, a big office chair furniture conference in Chicago held every year before COVID. And I was talking about the idea of active sitting and I just went to the big chair people. I went to, I got as far as one of the VPs in Steelcase, one of the biggest companies. And I pitched the idea of active chairs. And, she thought about it for a couple of minutes and she said, adults will never do that. Maybe for kids, but no adult wants to sit on some weirdo chair that moves. And I was struck a couple of ways. First of all, it seemed a little high-handed for one person, even if she's very smart and knows about the chair industry, to make a decision for millions,
Right.
tens of millions of people who might subsequently buy a chair. That just really, are you comfortable making that decision for so many people? I mean, that just seemed a little over the top. So that was one thing. But another thing that I thought was, well, maybe she's right. Maybe, you just can't get adults interested in some new weirdo way to sit. So that if you accept that, then you think, well, that idea is not new. I mean, famously, I think Linus Pauling, one of those quantum mechanics guys from the turn of the last century, famously said, "Science proceeds one funeral at a time," meaning you're not going to be able to convince some people. You have to wait for them to die. And it's a little morbid, but also there's at least a grain of truth in it. And so it might just be that big chair will have to go the way of dinosaurs, and we'll have to start over with younger, more flexible people who can imagine wilder things. And that led me to the idea, okay, well, let's try these things out in schools. Kids come with no preconceptions, so they're fun to be around. So
yeah, they are.
But the idea of changing up all the chairs in a school is a pretty expensive proposition. So we would have to come up with a design that would be pretty inexpensive if we want to take on schools. And as we were designing away, I thought, as a mathematician, you're always looking for the limit. What's the cheapest chair you could make? Well, how about free? How would that be?
Yes.
So we cobbled together. We developed several different designs for joints and plywood working and stuff. And wood joinery, as you may know, has a long history. The Japan, you can find books of Japanese wood joints that are fabulously complicated and very cool, that they were making with chisels, hand tools for hundreds of years. But now we have the CNC router, which is like a robotic blade that cuts any pattern you want to program into the computer that controls it. And you can make very, very, very precise joinery quite easily. You just put the program in and it cuts these things. So we were able to make a very elegant joint that would let us just cut out sheets of plywood into 4 pieces that lock together and turn into a chair without any screws or glues or assembly. You hardly need a manual. Just bang on it with a wooden mallet or a rubber mallet, and it just locks into a chair. And it's got 4 pieces. One piece is these 2 legs, another piece is these 2 legs, another piece is the pedestal, another piece is the seat, and the seat is stitched on with a little bit of bungee cord.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of looks like a button, so
yeah,
we call it a button chair.
Mm-hmm.
The BUTTON.
Right.
Chair.
Right. I chose the other pronunciation deliberately.
you can kind of tell we're going for the middle school market.
Right.
And then we started out by putting a tennis ball under the seat, and really kids were wearing out the tennis balls within a month.
Wow.
So we thought, okay, fine. So now we know that they're really rocking. So we switched up to lacrosse balls, which are pretty cheap, and now you have a solid rubber ball. Let's see them wear that out. So you learn a lot by putting a prototype under a kid, because they'll stress things in ways that you never imagined possible. So
right.
Our early adopters here in Burlington, Vermont, taught us a lot about chair design. So we have a website where we let people download the design for this and the CNC file. We have one version that people can make with hand tools if they don't have a CNC router. But if you have a CNC router, you can stamp out hundreds of these things. You just program the thing and keep putting in a new sheet of plywood every 30 minutes, and it just keeps creating more chairs. Our programs have been downloaded about 2,000 times now, places like Australia and Taiwan and all over the United States. So our idea is, okay, fine, we'll just let Big Chair, this is going to sound terrible, we'll let Big Chair finish off all the grown-ups, and we'll just talk to the kids. And but we haven't completely ceded the world to Big Chair. I kind of think that things like this. I do. This is my third podcast today, trying to kind of get the word out that active sitting is important because sitting still is killing people. And I'm just one guy. I'm an emeritus professor, and I don't have that much more life in me really. But I do think we're making progress. For example, I don't know if you follow football. I don't really
I,
follow
I
football.
follow the Bucks that just won the Super Bowl. That's the extent because I grew up in Tampa.
Well,
So
there,
I'm
there, well,
go
there,
Bucks.
there you go. You may or may not have noticed that there was a Super Bowl ad this year for active sitting. And if you missed it, I'll send you the link by a company called Fully, the CEO of which is sort of a friend of mine. We've collaborated on ideas over the years.
Mhm.
His company is obviously, doing much more business than mine if he's buying a Super Bowl ad. But they made a terrific ad where people are having fun sitting actively, and I think that's huge. The idea that
Yeah.
it's I'm just like a scold telling people not to sit stupid and die. And he's got dancers making sitting look like fun. Um, Now that said, I think our chairs are a lot better, but I would say that, wouldn't I?
Well, I think they are. You were generous enough to send me a couple of them, and they're phenomenal. They're just brilliant. The only chairs I would recommend, and I'm not one to, the only thing I would recommend is a stool, otherwise, just a flat stool. But your chairs engage the muscles. You mentioned to me before that someone even lost weight after sitting on the chair, which is phenomenal for all that core, that belly fat that you have, that now the other muscles are being engaged while sitting. And so I don't promote products because again, like I said, I like to rely on the self, but I sit in something. I don't sit on the floor and I don't squat all day. So if you are going to sit, I think this would be the best one. And what I love about this so much and what I love about your message is that you have that strong medical background. You're a surgeon, professor, researcher, epidemiologist, you've done that. And then you've dabbled into Feldenkrais. I know you're familiar with the Alexander technique. You're so open and you've somehow managed to create something that has not only not offended communities like that are different. We in the Alexander technique community, I know Robert Rickover was so just impressed by you and loves the chair also. I think he has the core 360 if I'm not mistaken, but and that says something. You've created something that uses the body, that allows the body to use itself as it was designed, and I love that so much about your work.
Well, I have to say that it's because I had great teachers along the way. Not just like people teaching me anatomy in medical school and stuff like that, but also the Feldenkrais community has been very helpful to me in understanding how the body works from inside. As a physician and especially as a surgeon, you kind of think of the body from the outside. You pull in this tendon and this finger wiggles, and the inner work of how to pilot a human body is something that medicine is pretty silent on. It's not really part of their deal. And so I had to find other teachers, and I was very fortunate to find people not just in the world of Feldenkrais, but also in the Alexander world, and also in the martial arts world. There's some martial arts like Aikido, which is a martial art that I study, which is all about posture and position and balance and timing, rather than hitting stuff or breaking stuff. And so just it's about how to pilot your body under duress or in certain circumstances that might be threatening. And so all of these things, it's as though it's a perfect storm that kind of brought me to this point. It's not that I'm special; it's just that
You're special.
happened.
I would say you're
I
pretty
just,
special.
I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, which is it's nice. It's nice to be in the right place at the right time.
Yes. Well, I appreciate you being at the right place at the right time. I'm so grateful to know you and to especially have you on the podcast. And so before we finish up today, I wanted to ask you, Turner, what are some final thoughts, if you have any, that you would like our listeners to take away from this?
Well, it's not God-given that you have to sit all day. If you're lucky enough to walk from home, you can work for a while and then you can lie on the floor or you can go for a walk. And these things should not be underestimated. These are the ways. This is how the body is designed to be used. You're in the design envelope of your body when you're doing different things. Hippocrates famously said, walking is man's best medicine. That merely walking is so helpful for people. You don't have to do jazz aerobics. Just going for a walk with a dog
Yes.
is a long way there. So that's the first thing is, you don't have to beat yourself up about not going crazy doing aerobics every day. Aerobics is good. And interval training is terrific if you want to do better in your next Ironman contest or whatever. But if you're just looking for longevity, the Japanese are the longest living developed country population, and they don't have gyms in Japan.
Wow.
They just do a lot of walking and gardening, and they think it's normal. So building activity, building motion into your life is really the key. It's not eating special stuff. It's just liking stuff that's good for you. And if you can build activity into your life, that's terrific. So, if you can get rid of your car and walk to the store, this is terrific. For many people, that's not possible. But one thing you can certainly do is you can take your slumped 8 hours a day in a chair and move that Herman Miller Aeron chair into the garage and find yourself an active chair, ours or somebody else's, and suddenly those 8 hours a day aren't wasted, slumped with your muscles gone dark. So that's a decision you only have to make once. I'm going to switch to an active chair that will pay benefits literally 8 hours a day for the rest of your life. That's an incredible bargain.
Yeah, it's an investment. That's a huge investment in your
Exactly, an
future.
investment in yourself.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Thank you so, so much, Turner. I have enjoyed this tremendously. It's always so much fun to talk to you.
Well, Tammy, thank you again. Conversations like this really clarify stuff for me. It's very helpful. And my wife thanks you because having gotten this out of my system, tonight at dinner we can talk about something else. So
Wonderful.
happy.
Wonderful. Well, enjoy your dinner and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you so much, Turner.
Sure. Thanks again, Tammy.
Thank you.